more, collegial and less formal. So please, stop me anytime, ask questions. I don't mind at all. And I do want to apologize in advance if I'm not clear. I have a cold, and so I'm not pronouncing my words very clear. Lita, I see you on the phone. You know how it is here when the furnace shuts off in October in Phoenix, the change of the weather, so bear with me. Anyway, so thanks for attending. I'm not sure if any of you were here for, yes, Lita, thanks. And when Dr. Barkley and I did this presentation, the faculty meeting, but the title of it is The Impact of Plagiarism Training on Student Learning Outcomes and Institutional Effectiveness. And I'm going to kind of skip over here over our agenda. You can look over that briefly just to see what I'm going to cover today. I don't want to read it verbatim. Speaking of verbatim, that's what we're going to talk about. And so what prompted this whole idea of this is, Dr. Barkley, Bill and I have been talking about, starting a doctoral program for a lot of people. I mean, and we put this in here, it can be a time of what? It can be, I'm sure all of us here can think of, back to our own experiences of starting a doctoral program, a little bit of nervousness, a little bit of uncertainty, am I qualified, am I the same caliber of the peers that are sitting next to me in these classrooms? And a lot of our students, they don't come from, tier 1, tier 2 research schools. So they are, and I think, and we find is they have a lot of uncertainty going on because they've not really had the training that a lot of us on this phone call might have been, when we go into, a tier 1 research school or a tier 2 research school where it's ingrained in you from undergraduate programs on of how to write research and how to avoid plagiarism. And, I put on there on this, what is plagiarism? So I'd ask you guys, rather than reading this verbatim, what do some of you feel that, how would you define plagiarism? Would anybody care to share their thoughts, their feelings on this? No? Don, I see you look like you're getting ready to type. Yes. Using other words, thoughts as our own. Absolutely. Donna, when you say that, and that gets into, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that if I quote you and if I quote something and cite it, is that plagiarism? Or, is if I write it verbatim and cite it, is that plagiarism? That's I've heard my colleagues argue it different ways. No, quoting me with appropriate citation is okay. Correct. Yeah. But if I was to write what Donna just wrote verbatim and I still cited it without quoting, would that be plagiarism? And I think the answer to that is, well, wait, Donna, you're getting ready to type. Yes, you're right, it is. So what we did is I noticed that a lot of our students plagiarize. And what really prompted this was I teach 8550, which is kind of, this is their last class before they start their dissertation. And I just was kind of anecdotally, I started noticing that over the years, like, man, I'm really shocked that the majority of these students plagiarize. You would think that at this point, being in the system, in the pipeline, they wouldn't plagiarize anymore. And so I started coming up with this idea of, in my feedback, I would give them very specific feedback. And so I started posting in my classes, not just 8550, but all of them that I teach, resources to help them understand plagiarism. So I don't know if any of you have seen these ones that I have here up on the screen. Turnitin has a really nice one called Types of Plagiarism. and it has both cited and uncited forms of plagiarism. So I post that in my doc sharing up front in each class that I teach. Turnitin also has a really cool one. It's the 10 types, I guess what they consider their most egregious forms of plagiarism. Believe it or not, number one, according to them, is writing verbatim. So literally, I call it chunking. I'm sure some of you have other words for it, but you're literally taking a chunk of published written information and writing it and then citing it. Martha, yes. For what's HUSA mean for TI's plagiarism spectrum? Yay. Okay, got it. So what I started doing is I started posting those in the class. And then when I also teach at the University of Liverpool. And part of the training that we have to do is we have to take the plagiarism training. And they use Indiana's. How many are familiar with this plagiarism training? Is anyone here in this familiar with this? Say yay, nay. No, Patricia. No, Donna. Okay. It is what I do is only from you and Bill. Got it. Okay. What I do in my classes is I post the two Turnitin documents that I shared with you a moment ago, and I share this Indiana plagiarism. And what it is it goes, and you can go into it, and it gives you kind of a practice. You can practice it as many times as you want, and then you take the actual test. And it's 10 items, and you have to get 9 out of the 10 to pass the test. And what's really cool about it is that even if you don't pass, so you get 8, 7, 6, however many you get right, it will give you a printout of the ones you got right and the ones you missed, and why this is plagiarism or why this is not plagiarism. That's the really cool part I like about this training, is that it really teaches the students what does and does not constitute plagiarism versus what does constitute plagiarism. So it's not as punitive that way. And at the end, you get this little pretty certificate of completion, and then underneath that completion, there's an accountability statement in this big rectangular box that says, okay, basically, here I am, I'm going to paraphrase this, but basically now you know what does and does not constitute plagiarism. Therefore, there's no reason for you to plagiarize from this point on, because you know what it is. So what I did is I approached Bill, and I said, I'd like to do kind of a little pilot here, so to speak, just in my classes. And so what I did is I went into my, you can see my 3 classes that I did this in. And the reason I chose these 3 classes is because I thought this was a very good snapshot of students entering the program in 8,000 and 8150 as it's their first courses. And then toward the end of their program, right before they go into their dissertation shell. So what I did is I posted in the Turnitin resources that I showed you the links for, and the plagiarism training. And I made an announcement the first day in class about this, and I showed, explained where the resources were at. I posted it in doc sharing, and I sent an email to everybody in the class first day. And I offered them extra points, roughly about 10% more on their first assignment if they took the training and sent me their completion certificate. So they had to send that to me because, and that's how I knew if they passed it, because, and students are, they're slick. They'll say, oh, I passed it. I'd say, send me your certificate. Oh, well, I didn't get one. And they would send me what they got. I'm like, well, that's the feedback that you got when you did not pass it. So, I said, you can take it as many times as you want. Just keep track of how many times that you took this test. And I then followed up every day, daily, and with those who had not reported back to me. So obviously, the email list got smaller and smaller and smaller as the week went on. So initially, I had 71 students that I did this in my classes. 17 did not take the training. And again, this is self-reported, so I understand that, they may have taken it and maybe were too embarrassed to say they didn't pass it. But given, given the amount of times that some of these students took this, you'd be shocked at how honest they were. One student wrote, "I've taken it 41 times and I still cannot pass it. Help." So, the fact I actually even kept track of the average amount of times it took for students to pass it, and it was a lot higher than you would probably think. But so 17 did not take it, 24 took the training and failed, and 30 took the training and passed. So that's kind of a, oh, look, it doesn't show on my graph. Well, for some reason, I don't know if you see it differently than I'm seeing it, but that bar graph was a percent of those who plagiarized their very first paper compared to those who took the test. And so I don't know, can anybody see it, or is it, it's not showing up on my end, and I apologize for that. But because it did yesterday when we walked through it, right? That's the funny part.
Yeah, I was just
Isn't that odd? Yeah.
Pull up the PowerPoint if you want.
Anyway, well, those who did not take the training, 87% of them plagiarized their first paper, compared to 75% who took it and failed the training, and 57% who plagiarized who took the training and passed. So that was their, Don, what did you say? The left one is shown, but the right, oh, see, that's funny, and I don't have any of the pretty little bars on mine. So that's, anyway, you get the gist of that, I think. So Bill being as smart as Bill is, says, Greg, that's interesting, but, we could have a possible selection bias. And I said, oh, yeah, I see what you're saying, is that maybe those who took the test are just different than those who didn't want to take the test or who were struggling in the class. So what I did is I then kind of narrowed this down to only the students who were below 80% after week one. That's what I call, just so you know, to give you an idea where I came up with that. In all of my classes, each week, at the end of the week after grades are over, I send them what I call a courtesy note. And, I'll say something like, Greg, each week I send out a courtesy note to those students who are below 80%. This week, after week one, you are currently at, 65% for the class. Is there anything I can do to help you? So I'm always trying to reach out to them to help them. So that's why I came up with the 80%, because anybody below 80% gets that message from me each week. And so what I found then is I started tracking them. Okay, hold on. Okay. Is that everybody okay so far? All right. So the grades of those struggling students that did not take the training, at the end of week one, their grade was a 56% in the class. About midway through the term, about right where we're at right now in our current term, it was down to 52%, and then at the end of the course, 46%. So those students who started out struggling in week one that did not take this plagiarism training, they decreased their grade by about 10 percentage points. But now, interestingly, here are students that took the training and failed. So, they're not far off from where the students that did not take it in week one. But look what happens. Their grades start to increase, and actually, it levels off from about midway through. About a 14-point increase over the course. And then here are the grades of the students that took the training and passed. Again, all these are struggling students that were below 80% from week one. So, I guess, we could all interpret that how we want. If I go back and I look and I say, okay, well, they kind of level off after about six weeks, and they start to decrease over time. But these students do not, even though all of these students were struggling students. So there's kind of can you see that? I can see that line graph that I have here, where, cool, good. So, that's kind of a really good visual of what, even if they take the test and fail, it still has some sort of positive outcome in the end. And so I even broke it down a little bit more for some student learning outcomes. Those who did not take the training, 66% of their assignments were plagiarized over the course, compared to struggling students, 26%. So I don't know if that makes sense to you. So 66% of their assignments were plagiarized that were struggling versus 26% of non-struggling students who didn't take the test. And then 38 versus 15, 35 versus 11. So you can see that taking the training, it clearly has they're not plagiarizing as much, but the disparity between the two starts to shrink. So any thoughts on that? One of those speak now, forever hold your grapes. Continue. Martha's typing. You just speak up, Martha. Even a little training itself, absolutely. And so I looked at it, and we'll come back to that thought, and that's how I kind of look at it. So institutional effectiveness. 45% of students that did not take the training stopped being active and failed the course. But only 1 of 22 who took the training stopped being active and failed the course. And every student who took the training and passed completed the course. So, that's pretty powerful. I'm not saying powerful, but, it seems to be a pretty positive trend for taking the test. Yes, Donna? Absolutely. My motivation have been it, and I would absolutely agree. And that's why we separate it, because, you have Bill mentioned that too, you have a selection bias that, some students are motivated. I mean, let's face it, we don't like some of our students are here not really because we do have a very small group of students who use this as financial support for their lives. And that's why, and I have them again in this term, they are in class, they'll do discussions, but they don't submit any assignments. They have no interest in submitting assignments. They're not motivated to do this. That's why we looked at just the struggling students. So that way I could just say, hey, this isn't your typical go-getter, motivated, I'm going to conquer type student. These are students that were sort of, I guess you could say, behind the 8 ball, struggling to start with. So I don't know, Donna, if that helps. Obviously that doesn't address motivation, but it does kind of speak to the fact that all the students that were struggling, there is a clear difference in their outcomes. I'll wait and see what you're going to respond on. Yes. Why did they not take the training? That's a great question. I'm doing this. I'm actually doing the statistics right now again this term. And I'll share that with you in a moment. What I'm finding. So the bottom line is Bill has a line, and I've kind of adopted it, of meeting students where they are. So by meeting students where they are, and what I mean by that is I'm not throwing I'm not being punitive to them. I'm not giving them academic integrity letters for their first time plagiarizing. I'm going back with these students and working with them, and I'm taking bits and pieces from the resources that I have, and I'm saying, okay, here are the types, and this is another one that some of my colleagues have said, well, it sounds like to me you're accusing them of plagiarizing. Well, no, I'm not accusing them. I'm telling them. There's a difference. Accusing means I'm not sure if they are. I am sure they are. And so what I've found is by having that clarity and being open with our students, they're learning. And so what I'll do is I'll say, hey, here's a form of uncited plagiarism. Go back to this document and tell me which form that is. And they'll send it. And absolutely, right on. And so it's helping them understand it. And so, Bill knows I don't do academic integrity violation letters unless I absolutely have to. I mean, they just simply don't get it no matter what I do. So we've seen decrease in plagiarized papers, increase in their grades, and increase in institutional effectiveness because they're staying in class. So kind of a win-win. So what I've recommended is, adopting this idea that Bill has come up with, his slogan. Patricia, you're getting ready to make a comment. I'll wait. Oh, now it disappeared. Oh, now you're back. But we do meet students where they are, and, it's by giving them the opportunity and working with them to understand what does and what does not constitute plagiarism. I don't give them zeros for plagiarizing. I don't give them academic letters. We try to work with them. So we post these training and these resources in their classrooms for them to refer to. I also, one of my recommendations is having this mandated in 8,000 classes. What about academic inquiry letters? Yes, for academic inquiry. Now, is that I've not given an academic inquiry. Is that the same thing as an academic integrity letter? We do those for, I do those for students who are, repeat offenders.
Can you hear me?
We would like to see this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the inquiry letters is just not an accusation. It just says, can you explain why this Turnitin match is really high? And they don't necessarily get the formal letter where there's consequences. But we found just sending out the inquiry letter.
That might be what it's called, and I'm just using a different term for it because I just gave one 2 weeks ago. It was her fourth straight paper plagiarizing. And it's not, and that's what the letter says. It's like, we're not accusing you. We are, you have a chance, with 5 working days to respond. Yeah, and then is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yes. And then we decide based on the student's response if there are actual consequences, and then the second letter if there are consequences.
Yes, so Jim Castleberry does that, and what we usually do is, because they know if they get one from me, I've given them all I got. I've done every trick of the trade. So usually,
got it.
And they know that from me, so they'll usually make them take a writing course.
Okay. Yeah, and we take the opposite approach with the undergrads. Anytime there's anything that's a match or suspicious, they automatically get the inquiry letter. But again, it doesn't mean that there are consequences, because that's the letter that gets CC'd to the Code of Conduct office. But
I teach at Liverpool, and they're the same way. They have a zero tolerance. It does not. First time, they hold students and faculty much more accountable than we do, and that's actually one of my recommendations. I'm getting ready to say is that I feel that's part of where we do go wrong, and why students don't understand plagiarism.
Yes,
because we don't hold faculty accountable to it.
I agree, because I think we're trying to do it at the undergrad level in psychology, and they don't all get consequences. If they do, sometimes it's just taking off points, but then that still needs to get documented. But yeah, we send them out. My coordinator, that's all she does. And so, yeah, I'll let you continue, but I was just curious what your thoughts were on this.
You and I could probably have a good chat about this. It's something that I'm very interested in, and something I'm trying to resolve for a number of reasons. But, I know, like in we have NIH training in 8100, that's mandated. I don't know why we don't mandate a plagiarism assignment.
Yep. I agree.
The NIH trainings were 4% of their grade, okay? So why couldn't this be, 2 or 4% of their grade? I'd also like to see a little bit of training for faculty on reading Turnitin reports.
Yes.
What's that?
So we all need to learn that now.
Well, I literally just had a faculty say, well, it was 0%, there can't be plagiarism. What are you talking about? In fact, if you go to Turnitin, they have a little comment on there that says 0% does not infer that there's no plagiarism. In fact, it should be a red flag that there is. Because what they're doing is they are engaging in uncited plagiarism. And it's usually the type of plagiarism that I'm going to show you in a minute, where researchers said that and studies said this. Well, that's anytime you make a claim about what research did or what studies have, then you're obviously citing knowledge from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that somewhere? And so I write in my papers, says who? How do you know that? And it's a kind of a running joke in my class of says who. In fact, I had a student at residency one time. She's like, we're all busting up because she wrote on a napkin, says who, and sent it to me. What I'd also like to, so here's one that I think is just, I love what Liverpool does on this. They know if a faculty does or does not open the Turnitin, the document Turnitin, and they give you a percentage. So when I get my review, it's, it will show 100% of papers have been checked through Turnitin. Because I know that not all faculty open those. I mean, we know that. And so what I've been trying to advocate is that by doing this and holding students accountable, you actually have less behavioral problems, complaints, because what happens is I guarantee we've all know about this, is that we have some faculty who simply don't read papers. I call them postmasters. Lita, you and I have had this conversation, face-to-face, sitting in an airport, and what happens is then that student then gets an A, and then they go to Hickman's class or Jan White's class or another faculty who has, I don't even call it rigor, I just call it, they flat out did their job, they read it. And now they're upset. Well, I've never been told I was plagiarizing. Well, it's because no one's they've not read your work. And so if we could make this to where we know whether faculty are opening and checking these, that I think that would be a step in the direction of reducing that. That's one way. So any thoughts on that? Does anybody encounter that? I encounter that on a daily basis. There's another argument for training all students should know what plagiarism is. Absolutely. And in fact, that's what I like about this training is that's what they flat out tell you. Now you know. So there's no more excuses of saying I did not know. In fact, yes, Martha, you're right. I kind of use it like this, and I tell my students, and I know they're right, and I do believe them when they say there are some that they don't intend to plagiarize. And I use the line of, it's a lot like the law. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. It's still a crime whether you know it or not. And it's still plagiarism. Plagiarism is plagiarism regardless of intent. So it's up to you to learn what does and does not constitute plagiarism. But we have to have all faculty on the same page for that to work. So is there a percentage cutoff in Turnitin that indicates plagiarism? And I get this argument all the time. In fact, when I was trained at Walden, I was told anything below 25%, you don't need to check. That was my training. That was in 2010. Well, I'm here to tell you that's my answer is no. And so here's one right here, an 8% match. So if somebody is reading that Turnitin report and they glance and they say, oh, there's only 8%, I don't need to go check it. Well, that's verbatim plagiarism right there. And in fact, there's actually another issue with this because as you can see here right below my 8% match, they write verbatim and then the citation of Kennedy, House, and Williams doesn't go with that source. Now you got a twofold problem. You're writing verbatim and you're putting a source in there that's not where it's coming from. So now, I don't think a lot of our faculty really take the time to analyze that. I don't know. I don't know what you guys encounter. Here's a 4% match. So, there's only 4% match. Well, it's almost the whole paragraph. And again, here's an odd one. So, some of these authors are matching up and some of them are not. Here's a 2% match. So literally that whole sentence is written verbatim. No attempt to paraphrase that. And again, not the same source. It's not the author that is going to that source. And 8% is 8% of 100 or however many pages, which can be significant. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm trying to get my students, and what I do is I try not to be punitive with them. I say, and when I even do this in my discussion boards, which I don't, if you do, well, sometimes they'll do a quote, and I'll write, how would you paraphrase that in your voice? And so then they'll write it back, because I know they're quoting, which that's okay. They're allowed to do that, but I'm trying to get them to not even quote. I want them to paraphrase and cite, and then so what I do is I kind of reward them when they paraphrase it back. I'll say, oh, I like yours way better. You're the one who should have published that, or something just to get them excited about, hey, I can do this. And here's one at 0%. And they go on and they talk about this and that and recidivism, and they're providing facts and details, but they're not citing it. There's been a large amount of literature done. Well, what literature? How do you know that? So, and I see this a lot. I don't know if any of you on this phone call or in this meeting see students write that. They will write about literature this, research that, studies that. You can't make that claim unless you cite. Now, I did notice that isn't Martha, you are from the Writing Center, right? Is that correct? So, how do, from a researcher or from someone who writes research, I was taught at Ohio State, you cannot make that claim unless you back it up. Is that correct? Correct. That's what I thought. So this is one of the most common forms of plagiarism I see from students, which is why I write says who. How do you know that? How do you know there's been a little research on this? How do you know that? Literature, so that's right. Yeah, I have a comment that I use, Martha, and I have a Word doc of feedback that I use a lot, so I can just cut and paste instead of typing it. And because I save this one I'm about to say so often, I have to copy it. Anytime that you make a claim of content, knowledge, understanding, synthesis, analysis, facts, figures, research, studies, and opinions and experiences, you have to support with research, or support with resources. You can't make claims without citing them. And I think that's one of the biggest forms of uncited plagiarism. The two I see the most is definitely that and writing verbatim. And what happens is you'll see students who they write verbatim because they can't write, they don't have good writing skills. And I don't know if you see this, Martha, where you try to work with them and then, the sentences are incoherent and then they're no longer cited. But I run into that a lot. So same thing again. So this is how we ended it in the faculty meeting. Is I asked everybody in the audience, what are some strategies that you're doing? Yes. Yeah. And what I find, Martha, is that when you correct that, so here's what they'll do. They will plagiarize verbatim, and you'll knock them down a little bit in their grade, and then next week they will try to write in their own words, and then you can't even read what they're writing. And so then you'll make that, be careful with sentence structure, punctuation, tense shifts, all those things that you probably deal with a lot more than I do, Martha. And then guess what you see the next week? Right back to verbatim, because they realize I can't write like this. And so they go back to plagiarizing because they're not comfortable enough writing on their own. So that's why I find a lot of our students write verbatim. I don't know if you find that, Martha, or anyone else on this conversation. I'd love to hear what your experiences are. Anyone would care to, go off speaker to chat what you do? I'd love to hear. Yes, I do. You're right, Martha. That is a confidence issue, and I think that's why they revert back to writing verbatim, because I don't have the confidence to write at this level how I synthesize what I just read. Anyone else? I'm done at this point. So, I've now collected. I'm collecting data now again this term. I'm 6 weeks into it, but I've added other variables that I'm looking at. I'm looking at the percentage of papers plagiarized. I'm looking at where they got their undergraduate degree and or master's degree, because what I'm finding is that, or I'd say that, yes, you're right, Martha. I'm finding that, just to give an example, so far this term, I've had 55 students take the plagiarism training. This is this is almost disturbing. 47 have passed, or 47 have failed it. 8 out of 55 have passed it. And I've even broken it down to those who went to ranked schools, Tier 1, Tier 2 ranked schools. 4 of 8 have passed it. And I think it's like 44 out of 47 have failed it from unranked schools. So where they're going and getting their education plays a role in this. And I'm also going back and looking at the past faculty they've had, who have been known to inflate grades. And that plays a role in it. So, it's almost systematic of what it goes beyond what you can do in your own classroom. I call it inheritance. I'm inheriting students from other faculty. And so I always look at it like when they leave my class, I don't want to set up, Patricia, I don't want to set you up for failure. I don't want to set you up for failure. I want to give it, when they leave my class, I want you to feel like, all right, well, at least he taught them that. Any data on how many are multilingual among those that struggle? No, I do not. But in my 8550 class, the most struggling students, I would guess are multilingual. Patricia, that's a great question, and I've actually asked that question because what is important? Let me ask you this: is front-end retention important or back-end retention important? And I don't know, Patricia. I don't have an answer for that, but I do have an answer for it, and something I've been discussing with Bill, and I will share what they do at Liverpool, and I love this idea, and I think it would help students in the long run. Before you are allowed to take a class live, so what I mean by live is this: it's your class, okay, but you are not allowed to submit papers back to the students until you send them to your mentor. They have a faculty lead. In this case, it's the program director. So I have to grade the papers. I send them to the mentor, who then helps me calibrate grades to their expectations and checks for plagiarism and things like that. They work with me, and then when that faculty lead feels that I've been calibrated to their expectations, I'm on my own. If you don't adjust to their calibrations, you don't teach. They just will not tolerate it. And I think I like that because that assures me that the students that I receive from faculty, whoever, I know that they're doing their job. And it's consistent for the students because they know the faculty are doing their job. And so there's no culture of complaining and blaming and, you're out to get me. I don't run into that because the faculty have gone through a very rigorous calibration process. Now, I'm not a big government person, but I do like that because I see the impact that it has positively on students and faculty. I don't know if what do all of you think of that, but I'm actually recommending that. In fact, Bill and I are going to try to see if we can start that with new faculty hires. Yes, they do. Yeah, they have to take a training on plagiarism, and they have to sign a declaration. So they take it and sign it, that they understand, and they understand the consequences. So they're totally held accountable, as are the faculty. So I don't know. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you guys do. Your ideas. I'm done. It's your floor, so I'll chime in. Feel free to speak now or forever hold your grave. As Ferris Bueller, or as Ben Stein would say, Bueller, anyone? Anyone? We got two of you typing, Donna and Martha. Why don't you you just want to speak up? Be easier than typing. I'm going to allow them. Oh, I got you. Yeah, I like the training from Indiana a lot better than the one they have in the writing. Martha, I know they have one in the writing center. I don't know if you can comment to that, but it doesn't seem to be as good as the one from Indiana. Yeah, that's a good question because I don't know. I don't know the official name of it. You're quiet, lead. I'm going to pick on you because you're 30 minutes down the road from me. What do you deal with when we send you these faculty?
I refer a lot to the Writing Center and my colleagues there. They have some great resources. And, I'm sorry I was typing away, Greg, because this presentation has been so fantastic. And we're actually putting on a similar webinar, but with SafeAssign and introducing SafeAssign and the changes. So you're going to be a knock on your virtual door to help out with that.
Anytime. Yeah. I'm excited on the new data that I'm collecting because I learned from my first time around thinking, man, I missed this, and I wish I would have got that, and I wish I would have got this. So, it's just like any kind of research. You learn as you go.
Absolutely. But I agree with your approach, with the inquiry letters. Those are important just for tracking purposes. But I do, and I think everyone on the line, kind of work with your students first because a lot of time it's inadvertent plagiarism, and it just takes a conversation to turn it around. So,
yes.
The issue we run into with that is if everyone keeps getting a chance and keeps getting a chance, they're never held accountable, especially in undergraduate because they're going from our program taking electives and they're taking gen eds. So we found that even if you just send an inquiry letter and nothing happens, and it's probably different at the graduate level because it's more contained, but working with a student sometimes just means you let it, sometimes it's really, to me, it means you're letting them off the hook, and then if they just keep getting let off the hook, you know what I mean?
Is this Patricia?
I don't know. Right. In that class, exactly. Like, if they don't turn it around after the first time it's picked up in that class, then a letter will be sent. But you're right. If it is towards the end and it kind of slips through the cracks, you're right. That's a very good point.
Yeah, and we have a database. So the BS Psychology program has a database. Every time they get an inquiry letter, we keep track of it. If there are consequences, we keep track of it. And supposedly the Academic Integrity Office is working on centralized database. So that's the other issue. There's no record keeping, so we just started keeping our own. And it's repeat offenders, definitely. And then the homework, the whole other issue is the homework marketplace. There's online websites where they can just buy papers. That's a whole different issue, but it's cheating, but that is egregious, and that happens a lot too. But you said you had a question?
Well, I was going to ask you, how do you, someone asked me this before, is like, because you say you're right, you have repeat offenders who just keep doing this over and over. Wouldn't it be nice if I had, I'm going to make this name out, Greg. So Greg's my student, and Greg is plagiarized, and I want to take it easy on Greg. I'm trying to work with him. Well, little do I know that Greg has already had an academic integrity letter twice.
Yep.
Yep. We should know that because here's what I do is when I have one, but I do this in every class, but especially 8550. When I see students in 8550s, I'm thinking, okay, how in God's name did they get here? It's not possible. So I start looking to see what they've done, who they've had. And it's the same thing every time. And I started thinking, because then here's what they do. I've never been told this. I've never done it. And I go and I find out, I'm like, you've been plagiarizing for years. You just never got, or you have had bad grades and you're lying to me. I know these things, but it would be nice if we didn't have to go to the extent of self-enroll in every class to find out who this person is. That is a great comment, and I wish we had something for that, but we don't. How do we
like
know
I said, I've
somebody...
heard that the office is starting a database. I don't know where it's at, but at least there's a couple people that are part of that now besides Gina. There's Julie. What's her last name? There's someone that manages the code of conduct inbox. I can't remember his name, and Julie Ogren. But at least there are more people, and so it might be worth emailing and asking, how's that database going along? Oh, that's a joke. Just so they know that more people are interested and they've heard about it. Because I know there's only so many people and they only have so much bandwidth, but I feel like it should be a priority. I
think from my experience, what I found is that the biggest issue really isn't the students, it's the faculty not holding these students accountable.
I agree with your keeping track of who the students had before.
Oh, you have to, because I want to know what I'm dealing with. And, and I just did this yesterday. 4 students in 8550 that I'm telling you, they're no different than the 8,000 students, yet they're getting ready to go on their dissertation. And then you go and you look, and sure enough, it's a common theme every time. And Lita, you and I sat there and talked about this exact conversation on a certain faculty member at the faculty meeting. And you're like, what do I do? I don't know, Lita, what do you do? I mean, it's the same thing no matter what Lita does to help this person. It's the same thing. And it's frustrating, and that's why our students continue to do this, because they don't have faculty who hold them accountable. So yeah, it's a vicious cycle, and it's frustrating. Wish we had the answers. I guess if I could be Grand Poobah for the day, what would I do? That'd be a good question.
Maybe have all the PDs assign faculty members to listen to this webinar, because it's very informative and great.
But you know what? It wouldn't change anything. I just don't. For some of them, it won't change it. And it's not even that they do this at multiple universities. The same people that I see not doing their job here, they don't do it at this university and that university, because it's a small world. You know everybody.
One thing we've been doing in the undergraduate program is my lead faculty, when they go into the classroom, they look at all the Turnitin reports, and they say, hey, what have you done? I noticed that this match is high. Have you sent the student a letter yet? If you haven't graded, it's not too late. And we've recently shifted focus to that, and I've noticed a difference. And I don't. Can
you say it again? What do you do?
So my lead faculty in the BS Psychology program, when they go in to review their classrooms every term, they go in, usually they get the link in week 4 because we only have 6-week terms, and they will look at all the weeks of every Turnitin report for all the assignments and then ask the faculty, well, I noticed this was a high match. Did you send a letter, or you haven't graded it yet? Great, you still have time to send the inquiry letter. And I've noticed an increase in my faculty sending the inquiry letters based on that, because they know, and they know we're not being Big Brother. They know that it's an issue, and that we want the students to succeed. We want their degree from Walden to have integrity. I mean, for me, that's what it is. We don't want to be known as a degree mill, and I feel like this is one way to address that, is that they have to work hard. The degree means something. So the faculty, they don't mind. We do it in a way I feel like that doesn't feel like Big Brother-ish. We just say, hey, we're here to help you. We're here to help you identify high matches. And so more faculty are. So that's one idea, is when your lead faculty, if you have access, to them is to have them not just focus on how are they grading or how are they doing the discussion board, but are they saying something to the student? Like you can just ask, have you talked to the student about this?
Good stuff.
Idea.
So we should all do a presentation together.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely interested in this.
I mean, I'm sitting there listening to what Martha's saying, what Lita's saying, Donna. Yeah, it's like, sure. I mean, it sounds like we would have a pretty powerful, presentation to give at a faculty meeting sometime.
Mm-hmm. Did you send this in for the session, the winter session?
No, I already did this one in the summer. Yes.
You did.
So
okay.
I'm not going to do this one in the fall or the winter one. Excuse me.
Got it. Okay.
So I think that's why I don't know if Melissa's on here or not again. Are you still here, Melissa? But
yep, I'm still
this
here.
was part of I think when you have to then do a webinar. And so I'm thinking, all week this is kind of like, man, if all week's not to feel good.
I appreciate your work on this. Keep it up.
Oh, no problem. And I enjoyed it. And I'm going to, if anybody wants to keep current on what I'm gathering now, just let me know. So I'm glad it wasn't a big audience and it was kind of more of us just chatting like we're doing. That reminds me of the old days. I like that. So is that it? I guess I have to. Melissa, are we allowed to just go our own ways, or I don't?
Yeah. I was just going to say, if there's no more comments or questions, then we can go ahead and end it here. But Greg, I'd like to say, thank you so much for doing this. It's been
thank you.
It's been a really good webinar and very informative, I think.
Thank you, and I really appreciate everybody chiming in. I mean, you made this fun for me. So rather than just get up here rambling.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg.
Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.